Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri, and our next guest is an incredible young actor who I praised rightly for the ABC drama American Crime, and now you can see Connor Jessup in the new Netflix show Locke Key, where he plays Tyler Locke, a young man who, along with his siblings, discovers the secret keys to his family's history. Please welcome Connor Jessup. Hey.
Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for coming by. American Crime, a completely different kind of show.
About as opposite as you could get, yeah.
Does that mean that your performance feels, the way that you approach the character, the way that you approach the set, the way that you approach shooting feels completely different as well?
I mean, yes and no. I think everything feels different no matter what the content is, just because it's a new group of people, it's a new character, it's a different time in your life. You know, it's like when I did American Crime, I was 22, 23, and I was a few years older doing this, so I was just a different person. But one of the fun things about movies and TV is that on a basic level, whether you're making like an art house movie in the jungles of Colombia or you're making Locke and Key, the basic mechanism of it is the same. You know, the process is the same. There's still a script. There's still people sitting around you. There's still like the mechanics are the same, which is actually really reassuring because it means that you can bring something. It means that learning carries over. You know, it means that something you learn on one project like American Crime, which is so different on the surface, it still sticks with you on something like Locke.
It sounds like you haven't really worked with a loose cannon director yet who completely upends the process.
No, I'm really lucky. I mean, I've worked with a lot of directors. One of the fun things about TV is that you get the chance to work with dozens and dozens of different directors, way more than if you're just doing movies. And I've been lucky that no one has been, I guess, a monster yet.
TV directing, I mean, really, with the exception of the showrunner or the sort of lead EP who directs the first episode or so, you know, you can't really be a loose cannon there. A tight ship has pretty much been designed for you.
Directing for TV is really different than directing a movie because a lot of the decisions that are a huge part of directing movies, like the locations, the cast, the wardrobe, script, like all those are sort of already chosen for you by the showrunners or by the pilot director. So you come in and you really focus a lot more on, really the extent of your job is mostly working with actors, blocking scenes, managing schedule. It's like, it's a more focused job in a way. So, but I've been lucky that I've had like really fruitful relationships with directors on TV.
Well, you're a director yourself, right? You've made a few short films.
Yes, but very different than TV.
Of course, because they're not a massive production, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's mostly just me and my friends.
Right, but do you take a lot of what you've learned on the set of something like Locke and Key or on the set of something like American Crime when you make those?
Yeah, I mean, I started acting when I was like 10 or 11 years old. So I grew up on sets. There's so many people who have come into my life, either actors, directors I've worked with, crew members I've worked with, people I've met through jobs who have made me who I am just as a person, but who also have given me all that I am as a director too comes from that. I mean, everything I know, my taste, what I like, the people that I've gotten the opportunity to work with, almost all of them you can trace back directly or indirectly to work I've done as an actor.
Has it been, I mean, I'm curious about that because my taste, particularly when I was growing up, was developed out of sort of finding these movies that it seemed like nobody else was watching, and I never was working on set or knew anybody that was on a set or anything, so it felt very much mine and solely mine, and that's how my taste developed. As someone who grows up on a set and is around different kinds of tastes and is just around the sort of day-to-day business of making a movie or a TV show, how did you pull your taste out of that?
I think in a weird way, kind of the same way, because I mean, my family was always super supportive, but I didn't really come from like an intensely movie-watching family, so I still went through that same process of being like 13 or 14 and discovering movies and feeling like I was the first person ever to watch the 400 Blows. Like, you know, it's that like really arrogant, obnoxious, like I'm discovering new territory here. And I think that feeling, it really fills you and it makes you want to watch more. It makes you want to make things. It makes you, and I was lucky because I was going through that process that so many people do, but I would get to watch those movies at night and then the next day go and work. Yeah. So
did you ever get dismayed by like seeing something like the 400 Blows and being like, oh, I'm going to show this, talk to everybody on set about this tomorrow, and then you get to set and like far fewer people have seen the 400 Blows than you expected on a movie set?
When you're 14, that's exactly what you want. You want to be the one telling people about I mean, you want that look in people's eyes, like, what are you talking about? Because it makes you feel very sophisticated. I was like a really terrible 14-year-old.
Precocious 14-year-old.
That's a nice way of saying it, yeah.
So talk to me about Tyler Locke. Like we said, it's a completely different kind of show than American Crime, but not a tragic character, but a moody character, per se.
Yes. I for some reason...
Strange, because you're all smiles.
Yeah, here.
Here.
I don't know. For some reason, I find myself drawn to these characters who deal with... I guess the nice way to say it is they deal with whatever it is they're feeling internally. And I think there's something masculine about that, but also something teenage about that, where you feel so much and you don't have the language or the tools to express how you're feeling or to deal with how you're feeling. And a lot of the characters that I've played, including Tyler, struggle with that, with feeling so much. In Tyler's case, it's the trauma of losing his dad.
Who he had a fairly fraught relationship with prior to losing him, correct?
Yeah, they had like a kind of a typical son-father teenage relationship. Nothing worked. And the tragedy of it, of course, is that they probably would have gotten through that, but now that relationship is frozen forever at this place of like dysfunction. So he really struggles with that and with feelings of guilt, but he doesn't know how to handle this. He suddenly feels like he has to step in to the vacuum that his father left and be like a dad to his siblings. And he feels like he has to take care of his mom, who is also not doing well. He puts all this responsibility on himself, but doesn't have the tools to deal with it. And that he's a different character than other characters I've played, but there's a similarity there, I think. And I think it's a very teenage thing, but also a very boy thing of like not knowing how to process feeling.
That's an extremely articulate take on the character. Are you able to explore all of that depth in something that has to kind of focus on plot beats and on fantasy and on fantasy?
I mean, I grew up. This is exactly the kind of show that when I was 11 and I was starting acting that I dreamed of doing, because all I did was read Narnia and Harry Potter, and all I wanted was to like get my letter to Hogwarts and go through the magic door and find the lantern in the forest. That was the goal. So if you had told me in 15 years you're gonna be like putting a magic key into the back of someone's neck, I would have been like, this is the dream. But what I love, the best fantasy books, the best genre books and movies, what they share is that they use that device or the plot or whatever their mechanism is. They use it to smuggle in ideas about what it means to grow up, what it means to deal with trauma, what it means to deal with love. That's really what sticks with me about those stories. And so to get to your question, with this, I felt like there's a lot of plot, there's a lot of, I guess, like light and color around the edges, but none of that really works if you don't believe that that it means something to these people. And for us as actors, I mean, if it's one thing to be told that, okay, this green tennis ball is a shadow monster, but if the writing's good and you know why you care and what it means to you and why you want to protect your sister and why you want to protect your brother, it makes your job so much easier, and it really just becomes like anything else. And hopefully, as an audience member, it makes you care about the people.
You stop thinking that it's just a tennis ball. You don't have to focus on that. You can focus on all the other layers.
Transcend the tennis ball.
Yeah, you can focus on all the other layers of the scene that you've been building over the course of the episode or the whole show.
Yeah, and I mean, plot, it's like, I always feel this way, which is when I watch something, I'm always hard-pressed to tell you what the plot of it was, even like 10 minutes after. Like, plot is just a device. It's like the capsule of a pill, It's like it has to be there so that you have something to put other things on top of, but it's not really the most important thing. Yeah, and it's people and ideas, and I feel like our show has that. And the comics that the show is based on is so rich with that.
Did you read the graphic novels prior to the shoot? Were you looking at them while shooting?
I hadn't read them before the project came into my life, but in like a weekend, I binge read them before we started, and then I didn't read them after, because our show is very loyal to the spirit and the themes and a lot of the plot of the comics, but it's also a departure. We like to think of it as like a remix, like it takes familiar elements and rearranges them. So I knew that going in. I knew that we weren't being 100% beholden to every detail of the comics. So I wanted to read them for the spirit and then have permission or give myself permission to go in a new direction.
Did that ever affect you when you were on set, when you watched something being remixed or you read in a script that it was remixed? Did you feel ever like, oh, but I really liked how it was done in the novel? Can we talk about or
I mean, nothing that I can remember. I think it's a different medium, and also one of the things that I think took weight off of all of our shoulders was that Joe Hill, who was the creator of the comics, was really actively involved in our show and was so genuinely, sincerely supportive and excited, and like not just in like I'm doing press, I have to say it way, like really like he was like the #1 fan of the show, and he more than anyone was pushing us and pushing our writers to do our own thing with it, and his whole thing was that he wanted people who felt like they knew the comics, who felt like they knew what to expect. He wanted those people to be the most surprised by the show. So that permission meant a lot. So I think once we got into shooting, in a weird way, before you start shooting and now is when you start thinking the most about like worrying that people who like the comics will like the show. But when you're actually in the middle of shooting, everything sort of blurs at the edges and you just focus on
scene by scene at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're thinking about what's happening in this.
It's like, how do I get this next word out of my, it becomes very minute.
Are you, when you're on set, since you make films yourself, when you're on set, do you shadow directors or sort of look at what people are doing technically, or is that something that you can't really think about while you're thinking about a performance?
It's interesting. I think over the last few years, kind of in a weird, maybe counterintuitively, as I've started to direct a little bit more, I've been doing that a little less on set. When I was a kid, that was like, I can't imagine the number of camera assistants who still want to kill me. I mean, like, so annoying. But now I feel one of the things that starting to direct has actually helped me with, I think, is that it's liberated me as an actor to focus on that job. Because one of the great things about being an actor is that you don't have to worry about all the things that a director and a producer and writers and editors have to worry about. You come into the process in the middle after a lot of the hard stuff is over, and then you leave the process before the really hard stuff starts. So you're like just like the goo in the Oreo. Like you just are in the middle.
Well, everything is being set up so that you can show up and do your job, right?
Yeah.
Everybody else is going through the compromises and the ups and downs of getting a production set so that when the actor shows up, they can do their job. And I don't mean that in the sense that the actor is pampered. I mean that's what has to happen so the product can
Although
be
I have
made.
to say it can lead to pampering, because I remember being like, it's a good, I'm very thankful that my mom is as down to earth as she is, because when you're 13 or 10, I think it's really easy to get to the line between people are doing their jobs and you're doing your job. And like, I'm a person who deserves to have an umbrella held over my head. It's the line between those things, I think, especially at that age, but really at any age, can over time become harder to see. So I think it's good to remind yourself that everyone is just a cog in this machine trying to do the same thing.
Was your mom like, no, he carries his own umbrella?
Absolutely. I remember the maddest my mom ever got at me was, I was on some show when I was 12, and at the end of the day, I was in my trailer and I took all my wardrobe off and I just left it on the floor. And she was like, who do you think is going to pick those clothes up? There's someone who has to come in and put them back on a hanger. And so I was, again, a little monster. So yes, I'm grateful for my mom.
Yeah, you would have done that whether or not you were an actor or not.
I was gonna say, it's basically, she told me the same thing at home too.
Yeah, all kids do that. We have a question coming in from Twitter. It's out of the Locke kids, we saw what the inside of Kinsey and Bode's heads look like. How do you think Tyler's is designed?
I don't even want to. I mean, he's in such a rough place at that point in the season. I would say it's like, at that point, it's like a hockey rink with the ice melted. You know what I mean? It's like it's very dysfunctional, and it's not even like a hockey rink to me is already sort of a miserable place, but that's just me.
Not a hockey fan?
I'm a bad Canadian.
I was gonna say,
but with the lights
puck.
broken and the ice melted, it would be even more. It's like something that I don't even really like. That's not even doing the thing it was meant to do. Is something really sad about that.
So you're not a hockey fan, but you're still a good Canadian because you can't make an analogy without using hockey.
I was gonna say it's just like hockey is always whispering.
Whether you like it or not, it's the sound of slap
we really
shots
can't
all the
escape
time.
it.
Yeah. Our first audience question is from Nestor, right here.
Hey, how are you? Hi, Connor.
I'm good. How
Hi,
are you?
Ricky. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So my question is, long time. So this is my question. If you have the opportunity to choose and pick and give a key to be used in your real life, which one would be and why?
Our answer to this changed every day we were filming. It's like because they keep introducing so many of them, and it's like the real like thought through answer is the ghost key, which is the one that you put in the door, and as you walk through the door, and then you turn into a ghost, which means you get to be invisible, you get to fly, and you get to speak to the dead, which seems like it might have some intriguing possibilities. But in my day-to-day life, I'm like a kind of a failed gardener. Like I have a garden in my backyard that I somehow manage to kill constantly. So I feel like the plant key would maybe be the most useful.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're a gardener?
I mean, again, like that would be a strong word for what I try and do.
What kind of stuff do you grow? What do you got?
It's just flowers. I do it with my best friend who lives just down the street from me. And this year we tried to do we took away a little bit of grass and tried to make a little patch of vegetables and never did. Like we fully grew kale and just never did anything with it. Like it just died. So it was sad, actually.
Second question's from Martin, right here.
Hi, Connor.
Hi.
So besides Locke Key, what other projects do you have upcoming?
There's one movie that maybe people haven't. I like to talk about is I was a very, very small part in this independent movie called White Lie that some friends of mine, Calvin Thomas and Yona Lewis, made. They're like very, very old friends of mine, and they're two of like you'll know about them. And, like they're so exciting. They're like two of the best young filmmakers out there, and they made this little movie that no one has seen and it hasn't really played. So if you ever get the chance to see White Lie, it's like again I'm like in like one scene, so I'm not even talking about myself. The movie is so good.
Has it been released yet?
It premiered at TIFF in the fall, so it's just sort of mid its release process.
Oh, fantastic!
But it's small and it's Canadian, and it's hard for those sorts of movies in the landscape now to get seen. So if it ever pops up on your iTunes or your Netflix, just buy it, and you don't even have to watch it. Just buy it.
Well, Locke & Key is on Netflix right now. It just premiered like last week, right?
Yeah, just over a week ago.
Just over a week ago. It's incredible. Another great performance by you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming by and talking
Thanks for having
about
me
it.
again.
Yeah, of course. Connor Jessup, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you, guys.